consent, I would like to move item number 5 under the city manager, that is the Sexton Woods traffic calming, or traffic planning. I would like to move that item to further down the agenda just before citizen comment. Does anybody have any objection to moving that item?
No objection.
No objection.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Under approval of minutes this evening, well, we have no announcements and presentations, but under approval of minutes, we have the City Council Public Hearing Work Session September the 15th. Did anyone see anything on that needed to be changed or updated? Seeing none. City Council regular meeting September the 20th, 22. Anybody?
Good.
Very good. Thank you, Sharon. Under the city manager this evening, we have the 2023 FGP compensation study that benefits proposal. I'll turn that over to city manager.
Would you like to say anything about it? Okay.
No.
You sure? I'm going to give you a chance. My name is Carrie Kavanaugh, and I am a senior HR consultant and compensation analyst from Find Great People based in Greenville, and I was selected to complete your new job descriptions for your to identify successful reviewed by employees and their back to me for us to have long-term for you to use from a recruiting and development perspective, but also those are what we based on the market study for, and we use those to identify like and similar positions within the market area, which we viewed as a 30-mile radius from the city of Chamblee. So we typically view 30 miles as about as far as the average person is willing to drive to go to and from their work. There are exceptions, of course, but we use that to create the market area and radius for us to look. We then take those positions using several forms of data. We use the Economic Research Institute, or ERI, which is a compensation software program that is not able to be accessed by the general public. It is a subscription-based survey data in which the survey data is never more than 12 months old, but none of the survey data that we use did the survey. Jobs and find a like job in the market, we have to match at least 75% of the essential functions of your job to a job in the market to call it a match. At that point, we're able to identify the market range of the role based on years of experience in most cases. So, for example, we might take a receptionist, identify that at 1 year of experience, we have a range from A to C, but at 4 years of experience, we have a range of F to H. That information was then compiled and shared with the team. Additionally, what we did was look at opportunities to create and update your salary bands. So the salary bands are what you use to say the maximum and minimum amounts for each position. There is always, most of us hate to say it, but there is a maximum value for every job, and it is important that we identify that maximum so that we don't get into a situation where we're overpaying for talent. What we then did was we looked at these new salary bands and identified, then we took your people and laid them on top of those bands to say where relative to the band do your people sit. And what that helps us identify is a level of competitiveness. So salary data, I always say, is not necessarily what you should pay your people, but what it's going to cost you to replace somebody. We all know that there are times people work because they just love it, but we know if somebody left, we would have to pay the market data to get them. So we did that. We created some new salary bands, and our goal was, and we looked at 4 different options, if I remember correctly, at ways to bring people up if we were in situations where that was necessary. Our ultimate goal and what we're presenting to you tonight is new salary bands. The bands do have reflect some changes in positions. So we did identify some positions that benchmarked higher than they had in the past. That just means that that skill set is in a greater demand than it was at the time it was initially placed in the salary band. And we found some that actually needed to drop a little bit. We're not recommending anybody's salary drop. Absolutely not. That's not what we're looking for. But our goal is to be competitive as a city. And what we wanted to do in order to do that was to establish a range and then have each individual at least at 85% of the midpoint of that range. So if the range is $10 to $20, the midpoint would be $15, and we want somebody at least at 85% of $15 an hour. That is a measure of competitiveness, and that allows us to bring everybody at least to a point of being competitive. Beyond that factor, the long-term recommendation, and something that we've talked with your HR team about, is to look at additional incentive or pay opportunities for people, but based on performance, based on merit. But this at least brings everybody up to a competitive space. When we look at that, we found that in your packet, you will see that we've got all the new salary bands for you, but additionally there is a graphic on the next to last page that will show you how that money is dispersed between each of your departments, with the primary department, not surprisingly, falling under public safety. So of the $900,000 that we're estimating that this would cost on an annual basis, 53.5% of that falls under public safety. And for public safety, in addition to just using our market data, we did survey several of your surrounding police and public safety forces to see what they were paying. And that helped us come up with those new ranges as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on this survey. No questions? No? I never don't have, there's never no questions.
I have to say that the information you supplied us was self-explanatory, and it was very thorough, so thank you for that. And I think that's leading towards us not having any questions.
Well, wonderful. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. John, is this something that we're going to need to take action on Tuesday, or is it something that can wait for discussion at the budget meeting? It's a very large ticket item, and I would like to discuss it at the budget meeting if we could.
We could take action on this.
I'm sorry. We could take action on this at the budget meeting. That would be something we could do, but I believe that we would need to take action at the budget meeting in order to be prepared for the following. Because we're actually creating the salary ranges with this action, and so we just need time to get that into the system.
Got it. So budget meeting is about 2 weeks away, so
Right.
I just want to give us all a little bit more time to flesh it out a little bit, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah. And Carrie, as you come back up, I don't want to let you off at any questions. So I won't be the first city council to do that. When you've implemented these in the past, these plans in the past, what kind of lagging indicators you've seen for stickiness with employees, or for, I guess I should say retention, or to bring in new talent?
Yeah, it's actually been incredibly helpful. I just worked with the city of Anderson, South Carolina, and actually what we ended up doing was it was $1.3 million was what we did, and that did not even bring everybody up to 85. That actually just brought the people up to the minimum of the bands. But I actually had a conversation, I was just telling Jennifer this earlier this week, with their HR director, who said that the response had been incredible from the people, and it was, the employees were very thankful that instead of just the 1% or 2% cost of living, which we know right now is not really the cost of living, that the city had actually taken great strides to identify what the market was for these roles. And instead of always doing the same across the board for everybody, they actually we looked at jobs individually, and we did acknowledge that there are some jobs, and I don't make as much as a doctor, and there's a reason for that, because they do things that I can't do. And we want to make sure that we acknowledge that, but then as well give you room to acknowledge performance. And what we really want to get to a point, I think all municipalities, cities, governments are moving towards, let's retain the really great people, and if we want to do that, we do need to pay them. And these new ranges will give you some room to do that, which I believe long-term will help you with retention, but employees are going to at least see, my employer has done something to try to get us there.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you build into these recommendations raises?
With this $900,000, I believe, don't quote me on this, that everybody gets an increase with a small exception of less than 5 or 6 people. Everybody's going to have some kind of increase.
Right, but what I'm really getting at is raises for been here for a year, done an exceptional job, that kind of stuff.
We do have some room for that. That is the next step of the process,
Okay.
which we wanted to get everybody to that 85% so that we really could look at what do we want to do for exceptional people and who are those exceptional people.
Right.
So we do have some room to do that, yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. And so it would be based on their yearly evaluation and that kind of
That is our plan, yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. That's all I want to know.
And I would like to add that if you could talk a little bit about the policy for the percentages, 85% and so on.
I mentioned the 85% number, and that is what we call in the compensation world called a compa ratio. It's just percentage to the midpoint. That's just how we kind of gauge competitiveness that way. But one of the things that we often do is use that number as a metric for performance and where someone should be ideally. And we're looking at, and one of the recommendations I made is to create a structure by which we use that number as a point to equal a performance. So if someone is less than 85%, now you don't want to come in, you can't bring somebody in at the middle. I mean, you don't do that. And so you have to have a rationale when you're going to be a little bit lower. The rationale can be they're new or they're underperforming. We would have someone less than 85. But if we look at that 85 to 94, we're saying, hey, these are people that are gaining experience. They're new, they're not the newest, but they're not fully competent yet. Ideally, when we get to 95 to 105, so right around the midpoint, we're saying this person is competent in their job. They come to work, they do it well, they don't need a lot of help. And then we have tiers above that, going up to 115 and then over 115% of the middle for those excellent performers. But it also allows us a conversation with employees. So an employee comes to us and says, hey, Elmer, I want to make more money. And we can sit down and we can say, well, here's where you are relative to the midpoint, but here's your performance. So if you want to get up here, our policy is, not our policy, but our practice is that in order to get there, you've got to really do a stellar job. And right now you're not. Or vice versa, we can acknowledge why someone gets paid more than someone else, which can help us legally if we had to defend something that says, why does Brian make more than Leslie? And I want to be able to, and this is going to help us have a framework to support that we can explain to employees and explain to managers and leaders who are actually doing the performance reviews and holding those folks accountable.
And so when we looked at that, and what we currently have kind of spread amongst our employees, we asked the question, why is this person at 78%? They started when they had no experience. They've been with us for 3 years. They've been getting increases, but it's been, kind of the standard increases. Should they now be closer to 85 or 95% because now they're not the new person who hasn't done it before. Now they're the person who does it every day. And those are the conversations we need to have on individual employees.
And additionally, some of those people that were in the 70s were in jobs that when you last did a study, were less valued, were not as competitive. Now they've become much more competitive. And we see that in the world, that some things become more competitive, some things less competitive. And this helps us get people at least to that point where we can say they're competitive. It's important to note that these kind of increases are not merit increases. Getting everybody up to 85 is what we would call a market adjustment. And so there are people, I am sure, on this list that may not be stellar performers or may be incredible incredibly stellar performers, but this is just going to get us all to a point where we can say we're competitive, we're fair, we have a practice that we're following in order to get this done. Then we can look at those next steps. And some may stay at 85. Some may go, this gives us room or runway to get them a little bit higher if they're that stellar performer, and we can keep them so we don't lose them.
Yeah, I just want to make one note in here for the audience at home that we are also revising the parental leave policy. If we adopt this to 8 weeks, which I think is great, and also the paid FMLA as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that wasn't me, that was your HR team, but that's a great thing. Most people don't do that.
And that's a great segue to the next item on the agenda.
I'm here for you, John.
All right.
I would only make one correction, and that is, we don't have any employees on staff that are not stellar performers.
I meant to say that.
All right, so that item will move off of the Tuesday agenda and move to the November the 4th budget meeting as a action item. Next up is the 2023 benefit contribution strategy.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead with the front.
As you want or not. But as Jimmy pointed out earlier, I am recommending that we make some changes to our fringe benefits, and some of those would include things such as expansion of the parental leave policy from 4 weeks to 8 weeks, keeping the 4-week paid leave for non-birth parents of newly born and newly adopted children, implementation of a paid FMLA leave policy allowing 4 weeks or 160 hours of paid leave for FMLA qualifying reasons that could be used by birth parents, but also for employees who may have a medical concern, or they may have a family member that has a medical issue that they need to tend to. Looking at employer contributions, and this is a good segue into the next agenda item, but for the health savings account with a $750 per year for individual coverage and $1,500 per year for family coverage employer contribution into those HSAs. Looking at implementing a spousal surcharge of $20 per month for medical plans covering spouses, but then having a $20 a month spousal wellness credit to offset that surcharge. Revising the residential incentive policy to provide $800 monthly housing stipend to all city employees earning $100,000 or less in annualized base pay. Implementation of the Cortico Wellness Platform for public safety employees, and implementation of the Gym Pass platform for city employees. And those do have estimated costs tied to them. Does anyone have any questions about these recommendations? Okay. So I think we're good to go to the next action item then, which would be the contribution strategy. Okay. So last we met in September, Mayor and Council approved the item that is boxed off in red there. So we bundled insurance with Cigna for medical, dental, and vision insurances. We chose to elect 3 Cigna medical plans, including a consumer-driven health plan, which would have a health savings account bundled with it. And then we moved our ancillary lines of coverage for life and disability to United Healthcare, as well as approved an audit for dependent enrollment on our plan. So this is just a refresher of what was approved in the last council session, and also looking at what that estimated cost increase is. And I do want to point out that the approved increase assumes a 20% participation in the consumer-driven health plan. So if we're looking to get that 24.4% increase versus something higher, we would need to try to figure out a strategy to get people to move into that consumer-driven health plan. Okay, so looking at market data, I surveyed 14 municipalities in the surrounding area to look at what their employees are paying per month versus what the local municipality is paying per month for their different health plan options. If you're looking at that market, we have 7 municipalities that responded, employees paying an average of $94 per month for employee-only coverage versus our $71 per month. That's a $23 a month difference. And there you can see they're charging $361 per month for family coverage versus our $213. That's a $148 per month difference. On average, all 7 municipalities were offering a $750 individual HSA contribution or a $1,500 family contribution toward HSA. And again, that was employer funded. So our contribution options that we're presenting tonight, this first option is consistent with the contribution strategy the city has had in prior years, wherein the city absorbs 90% of the cost of the premium, sharing 10% of the cost of the premium with the employee. So we're looking at using that cost share strategy in option 1 across our OAPIN plan, which has a $750 deductible, the OAP plan, which has a $1,500 deductible, and then having slightly less employee cost share on the consumer-driven health plan. So that would be a 95% coverage by the city to have someone, to incentivize someone to move into that consumer-driven health plan, and then it would be a 92% coverage on the employer end to have their family move over to that plan. Here we're also proposing that $715 and $1,500 HSA contribution for individual and family. So this is showing you what the total plan cost is in 2023 for each of these lines and tiers of coverage, and then what the breakout would be of the employer versus the employee cost share. So you can look at the monthly increase to employees there in that far right column over what they're paying in 2022. Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
We're on the CDHP part.
Mm-hmm.
How, can't get my brain around this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I have family of 4 and I want to switch, and the city's going to, how do I put that money in the bank?
Sure. So the city would put $1,500 a year into this plan for you. Then you would be able to take payroll deductions from your paycheck to put into this health savings account as well. These are pre-tax dollars that you can save for you and your family and your related medical expenses. What you don't use this year, you can roll over into future years. You can even roll it over into retirement because it does qualify under Medicare for Medicare eligible expenses. So, you know, consumer-driven health plans are usually used by younger individuals that don't have families, they just don't consume a lot of health care, or maybe families with older children that aren't going to the doctor for ear infections all the time and that kind of thing. So this is a really great cost savings strategy for an employee to take a little more home in their paycheck every pay period, but also they're getting a benefit of an HSA on the back end, which is, it's truly a savings account for any health-related expenses now or in the future that they may incur.
But the money would go in from your payroll, you know, each month, and then you would get a little credit card, essentially.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that it's a better option for people that don't have high medical expenses.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a second contribution option would be to create a little more differentiation between the 3 plans that we have. Right now, the OAPIN $750 deductible plan and the OAP $1,500 deductible plan, they are very, very closely priced. The OAPIN $750 deductible plan is actually a much more benefit-rich plan. So the intention with this option 2 is to create a little more price differentiation between that OAPIN plan and the OAP plan. Also, it would help to move more individuals to that consumer-driven health plan because there would be a greater savings that would be realized for them to move into that plan. Again, we're trying to get 20% of folks to move into that consumer-driven health plan. For us to realize that savings, we can always tweak the employer contributions into that HSA, but this would be an option that would create more differentiation between those plans to make clearer options and help people make better, you know, decisions for them and their families. If they're confused between plans, it might just add some clarity there. Any questions on these 2 options?
I would just add, and I think, Jennifer, if you could speak to this, both plans are competitively priced or similarly priced now, but there is a greater cost to the city with the $750 deductible. Is that correct? And can you explain a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So if we're looking at the employee cost, I want to go back just a minute here to this market data. So if our employees were to leave and go to another city, they're going to pay $94 a month for employee-only coverage. And in these options here, we're saying option 1, they would pay $91 on our most expensive plan. very competitive, still less than what they would pay going to another organization. And here, 110, but that's the most premium plan, so it's still very competitive. And these rates don't include any wellness credits. We're still proposing that we offer a $20 a month wellness credit to employees who go complete a biometric screening or a physical exam. That way they're being proactive in their health, and we're incentivizing them. Would still be very competitive or below that of market for employee-only coverage. And if we go back and we look at the family coverage at $316 at market, here are in option 1, the family coverage on our most expensive plan, still under market at $275.38, and then very close to market here at $330 as compared to that $361. So we're still under market, and we are proposing a $20 a month surcharge for spousal plans or plans that have spouses, but then trying to say, let's offset that by offering a wellness credit to them as well. The reason for that, we're seeing most of our claims, over half of our claims, over $1 million worth in claims that are driving up our premiums are coming from spouses and dependents. So we want to figure out a way to incentivize them to go to the doctor and be more proactive about their health. And so we're thinking if we add that surcharge and then we offset it with a wellness credit, it'll hopefully incentivize people to get out there, get to the doctor, and get their health issues addressed or identified earlier on, which over time should lower those claims. In terms of the cost to the city, as John mentioned, we have a lot of high-cost claimants. We have a lot of dependents and spouses driving those high-cost claims, and so that is why, again, we're looking at that spousal surcharge and wellness credit. And the more folks that we can encourage to take responsibility for their health care, we should see a downward shift in those claims and hopefully a leveling out of premium increases in the future.
But I just want to make sure I understand that the OAPIN 750, the city is paying more. That's why we're proposing to increase the employee contribution as it's used by our employees.
So
versus the OAP.
I mean, the OAPIN plan than it is for the OAP plan. So the city does pay slightly more for the premium for that plan. But where the spend is coming in is what the plan is spending. The plan is spending more on health care because we have these higher cost claimants. And then the employer winds up having to absorb that cost when it comes to renewal because we're seeing those claims drive an increased cost to the premium. So it's not that the spend is realized on the premium side in year 1. We're seeing an increase on the premiums on the back end after high utilization of the plan and high cost claimants that are running up the premiums on the claims. I hope that helps address the question. So any questions on these 2 contribution options?
Not necessarily on the options, but do we have a educational component in place to sit down and?
Yeah, we'll be having open enrollment meetings, and those will run concurrent with open enrollment. We'll meet with all employees. We'll explain the changes. We'll explain the 3 different plans. We'll explain example scenarios of what happens if you have a baby, you have to have knee surgery, something like that. How would it play out under each of these plans? Give them the tools and the resources to make the most educated decision for them and their families. And there will be a strong education component on the consumer-driven health plan as well, because that is a different style of plan than we've seen in the past, and I want to make sure that folks really understand the difference between that sort of plan and what that would look like in a calendar year, or even up front in the beginning of the year when they're having to go pay a lot more out of pocket under that plan versus having one of the more traditional plans where they have their traditional co-pays and things like that. So it's just a different way of accounting for their health care.
So I guess what I was asking, though, do we have a way to kind of remind folks and drive home if you are proactive in your health care, it's going to save you X amount of dollars a month? I mean, I find I do better with things with reminders. And, you know, I just want something in place that reminds folks, hey, if you haven't had your annual physical, go do it. You know, it's going to save you $20 a
Yeah.
month off your, so that's kind of what I'm
Right.
looking for.
So a couple weeks ago, we actually had our annual health fair on site, and we did biometric screenings and flu shots, and we had on-site dental services as well, and employees who go and participate in those events are eligible to receive their wellness credit in the following calendar year. I'm looking to provide more of those preventive care on-site services, because it's oftentimes really hard to get off work, to go to the doctor to get your teeth cleaned, or to get a mammogram or something like that. And so trying to bring those services on site so that we're keeping wellness and health in front of employees throughout the year is a goal for 2023, and continuing to offer those on-site biometric screenings and things like that so we can have early identification of any health issues and making sure people are connected with their health status.
Very good.
But, you know, I am curious about
Yeah.
one more thing. This is a group plan.
Yes.
I'm eligible for Medicare, all of it. Is there a way to segue into that for me?
I'm not sure what you mean. You have the...
I mean, I'm gonna have to pay something for Plan B and I think the prescription coverage. Right now, Medicare Plan A is, Part A rather, is, I don't pay for it. But when I do switch over, I'm going to be paying I'm going to be paying something per month. Which is kind of why I haven't switched over yet, because I didn't know if that would be something that the city would cover.
So you're asking if the city would pay for people's Medicare coverage? That is not something that we're proposing at this time.
Is that even legal?
We would have to look into options for that, and that's something that we could follow up on.
Something
Yeah.
my spouse anyway, so I'm just wondering if that's, okay, we'll talk.
Yeah, yeah. We'll get back to you on that. We'll look into some options and see what we might be able to entertain there. Yeah.
Any employee that's moving off of
Yeah.
the city's plan.
Yeah. Would be, yeah.
Like it would be a benefit to the city.
It would. The only issue I see with that, being just completely transparent, is that our benefits are far more rich than that offered by Medicare. So a lot of employees would not probably want to take that option, even if we were to make the payment, because they would be losing out on benefit that they would get through, especially when it comes to doctors, you know, who the providers are that are considered in the network. Certain services are not covered under Medicare, certain prescription drugs aren't covered under Medicare, and you're limited in the doctors, the facility. It's such a benefit-rich plan. Even if we were to offer that, I'm not sure that that folks would take you up on it.
We had Kaiser for a couple of years, a while ago, and that was an issue because pretty much you had to Kaiser.
Right.
Didn't have to.
Yeah. Kaiser's typically an HMO. It's structured very differently than the plans that we have, and so in a plan like that, you might have more incentive if you were to pay for someone to go to Medicare, but under our plan, not so much.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So considerations, we've always charged a tobacco surcharge, and we are legally allowed to do this under the Affordable Care Act. We are asking employees to certify whether or not they or any of their covered dependents are including cigarettes, cigars, pipes, any form of smokeless tobacco, closed cigarettes, or other smoking devices such as hookahs, e-cigarettes, and the like. This has historically been a $50 a month premium surcharge for tobacco. About a spousal surcharge, so this would be an additional fee that an employee is required to pay if they enroll in a plan that has spousal coverage for their spouse. And we have not historically had a spousal surcharge. But with the trend we're seeing with our high-cost claimants predominantly being spouses and dependents, we're suggesting that we add that surcharge and then we offset it with that wellness credit of $20 a month to incentivize those spouses to go get that preventive treatment and early identification of health issues so that we can try and drive those claims down over time. And then we're also proposing that we continue the $20 monthly premium for employees who also complete an annual exam or a biometric screening. So this could be next year, we do our biometric screening, we open it up to spouses as well. We give that opportunity for them to come in so employees and spouses can go ahead and make sure that they get some of those preventative care services here and they can take advantage of that credit. Okay. Questions? Okay. So the recommendation then is for the $750 a year individual contribution for the HSA and $1,500 for family, and then to go with the option 2 that creates the more distinction between the plans to help incentivize getting folks to move to that consumer-driven health plan, adding the spousal surcharge, but adding the spousal wellness credit as well, continuing the employee wellness credit, and continuing the tobacco use surcharge. Okay? All right, thank you.
All right, we'll move right into the East-West Connection Study Administration.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we've been working with the Chamblee-Doraville Community Improvement District in ongoing discussions about opportunities to address connectivity challenges that exist within our community as well as the Doraville area. As we know, we have limited crossing of existing rail lines, and that is a challenge for both businesses, pedestrians, residents, and visitors. So addressing the need for this east-west crossing is a priority of both the City of Chamblee and our plans, as well as the Chamblee-Doraville CID. And additional projects in the area, including ongoing and future redevelopment, as well as projects by GDOT and other transportation changes, are continuing to amplify this. Recently, the Atlanta Regional Commission has committed to award the Chamblee-Doraville CID a $500,000 grant through their Livable Centers initiative. $400,000 in federal funds will be passing through to the CID, requiring a $100,000 local match. The CID board discussed this 2 meetings ago and then voted at their September meeting to authorize the additional $50,000 in combination with $50,000 that had previously been allocated for this project to fulfill that match requirement. So this CID is taking on all match responsibility. CID also previously invested funds in completing a project prospectus for this need and opportunity and outlining some of the details to be considered. So the LCI funding is going to provide for the completion of a full feasibility study as well as a draft concept report. So the work will focus on identification of the most feasible location for the crossing, determination of which method is most appropriate, be it a tunnel or a bridge, and then also multimodal connection opportunities. So the Atlanta Regional Commission has indicated a preference for the City of Chamblee to serve as project administrator due to staffing expertise, qualifications, certifications such as LAP, locally administered projects, and the CID currently does not have staff available in terms of capacity and expertise to meet this need. Requested action is authorization for the mayor to sign a letter of support indicating that we as the City of Chamblee will serve as project administrator for this project. And we're anticipating ongoing discussions over the next couple of weeks and months in preparation for January 2023 work to begin.
So we're essentially contributing our time, or are we attaching a dollar value to it in lieu of?
We have not identified the valuation of our contribution in terms of staff expertise and time. We do not have a concrete financial contribution.
Okay.
I don't think there's an in lieu of, but I love this so much. I love this. Much needed.
Yes.
All right, next up on the agenda is the Q3 budget amendments.
Good evening.
Everybody's getting to speak.
Yeah.
I love it.
So this is actually just convenient timing that this is a time for a Q3 budget amendment, because what we're asking for this evening is to add a few more dollars to the City Hall project. It sure is. And so what we're actually doing is, so as you recall, we've issued a bond. The amount that the project has cost over the last 18 months has increased, and we have spent all of the funds in that bond. What we did on the last budget amendment was we actually allocated some money in the general fund to make it easier. What we're doing in this budget amendment is actually moving that money over. I'm not asking for an additional $940,000. I'm just moving that money into our bond fund so we can pay it out of one account rather than two separate checks, two separate accounts. That makes payments a little bit easier. And then in addition to that, we are requesting $200,000 to add to the project fund to kind of wrap up some of these kind of onesie-twosie add-ons, the more aesthetic stuff, the safety concerns that we've identified, adding a staircase to connect the parking lot, some of these things that we didn't see in the original design of the building, but now that we're in the space, we're understanding the functionality of it a little bit better. And so that's it. That's really what we're requesting here, and then we're also requesting an additional $20,000 just to have that coverage of the full remaining cost of the GMC contract. And then we are proposing to use this out of our, I apologize, I got the wrong account name on there, our budgeted fund balance. And that's it. Any questions? I very much hope so.
That was yes or no question.
Yes.
John, tell us how much we saved on this project by pulling the trigger when we did versus starting now.
Well, Kristen could probably do a better job of telling you that, but I can tell you that we got the lowest interest rate that you could possibly get last year when we pulled the trigger on that. And yes, materials have increased in cost over the last 6 months. We were very fortunate to get a lot of our material at the very beginning of this project. Our contractor identified that steel was going to be a concern, went ahead and procured that for us at the very onset, and that saved us a tremendous amount of money. So I don't know, Kristen, do you have an amount that you might throw out there?
I've been told recently from our contractor and from our architect, actually, that if we were to build the same building today, it would probably be about double the cost. I mean, that's how much the material increases have been throughout this entire project. We saw it right out the gate. I mean, we could not have borrowed money at a more perfect time, and I'm not just saying this because I'm standing in front of you asking for more money right now, but we truly hit the market at the exact right time to borrow money, and we got done with this project at the right time to avoid just how much the market has increased on these materials.
Yeah, two things. Brookhaven's City Hall, that they're proposing $60 million. So this is a bargain by those standards.
Anything else?
Amazing,
Good job, council.
absolutely.
All right, item number 5, we moved down further on the list, but we'll come back to it rather quickly. We'll go ahead and move right into Development Department. First up on the agenda is 5208 Peachtree Boulevard Utility Conversion Waiver. Who's got that one?
I'll do it.
Very good.
I'll take that one. We have a waiver request, and we'll start with the fact that based on the analysis of the application and the standards we have in our development ordinance, the staff recommends denial of this waiver request. It is a waiver from Section 350-25 to not place utilities, including telephone, electrical power, and cable television, in the public and private right-of-ways underground, and to alternatively pay a fee in lieu of to the conversion fund, utility conversion fund. This is for 5208 Peachtree Boulevard Life Storage. The applicant and owner are here. It's about 1.3 acres. And the request involves just waiving the requirement that was previously agreed to when it was originally went through the planning process. And they would like to waive that at this time. A little summary here for everyone's information. So the current owner purchased the property in 2018, at the end of 2018. The LDP issued for the construction showed that they were bearing all of the existing overhead utility lines, and that they would. The CO for the storage and buildings were all issued to the developer, not to Life Storage, but to the developer at the time. And that CO was actually issued in March of 2018. One of the requirements of that CO was that the developer submit evidence to the city showing that they had paid Georgia Power to put these utilities underground, as well as other companies, because it's also the AT&T and so on. And so they provided that proof that they had entered into a contract with the utility companies to put those utilities underground. After they received their CO, staff wondered why the utilities weren't underground and inquired multiple times about this. The staff learned from Georgia Power that the developer had called, after receiving their CO, had called Georgia Power and the other utilities requesting a full refund because they had decided not to bury the power lines. And so that is the beginning of where we are today, because that was a condition of zoning, that was a condition of the development, and that was, frankly, inappropriate for that developer to tell us that they were doing something, to show us proof that they were doing something, and then essentially turn around after they had what they wanted and walk away and ask for the refund of those funds. So the applicant does request a waiver, and the city does, city staff does suggest that you deny it. Here's the location next to Sexton Woods Drive and Peachtree Boulevard. A little of the information about what poles are there. Here's photos of the building, and that's just for your review and consideration. And that's it.
Okay, I'll start on this one. So there's someone here representing.
Yes, good evening.
So if you would just, if you'll start off by, you've heard the staff summary. So if you'd like to give us a little bit of an explanation of why you're requesting this at this point, and why what happened.
Right, and I'm glad to do that. I think there's a lot of color that I'd like to add to that summary. So to be clear, the owner of the property now has no prior connection to the developer or the person who built the property. That was a prior owner, and I think that it's somewhat of it could be confusing or a misstatement to say that, and to think that this.
Can I stop you real quick? Who are you?
I represent Life Storage Healthcare. We are, as you can see on there, we are a life. We offer storage space that is air conditioned inside, and we have been in this facility since November 1st of 2018. A little bit of background about this property. This property was built by a separate developer and a different company that had nothing to do with us. We had no relation with them. And it was built, and the certificate of occupancy was issued by the city on March 3rd, 2018. We were not involved, had no idea what representations were or were not made at that time about why the CO would be provided. We frankly came around later, I guess in the late fall, really late August, early September, and started doing that goes out and does due diligence on the properties. We had numerous communications with the city at that time about the property, whether it was in any code violations, whether there were any outstanding work that needed to be done on the property. All of that sort of information was not only done and conducted, we have documentation of it, and I'll get to that in a second. But long story short, we went through the due diligence process. We purchased the property after conferring with both and to be fair, we are very frustrated and most frustrated at the prior owner for what we think, could be very fraudulent and have other sorts of liability reasons and rationales. And we're actually been working with Andrew Russell and the city to gather some of the documents to understand what is going on. We've submitted public records requests. The city is going through the process of looking at emails, trying to figure out the city knows exactly how the CO was ultimately initially provided, but it was. And so we come into the property on November 1st. We get any word, and then all of a sudden, I think the city was in a meeting, Andrew was in a meeting with Georgia Power on something else, and the issue of where they were doing OHUG came up, overhead underground utility replacement, and it was just with Georgia Power, which is just one of the 4 different utilities that was there, has gone from $208,000 to over $500,000, and that was if we were to do it with another facility that was kind of right next to ours. Unfortunately, after speaking kind of with the city employees, they recommended that we actually file this waiver despite their recommendation today. They said, you should file this and put it before the city, and so that's what we've done. And in the process, Georgia Power has since told us that they're not waiting anymore. So the $500,000 and I think about $50,000 that Georgia Power had quoted us to work in connection is now going to be significantly higher than that. As far as, and again, we had no clue about any of this throughout the whole time, and have really been, I like to say we had the white hat on here, but, and a lot of times people say, well, is that right or is that wrong? You surely could have done something else, but we truly were an entity that had nothing to do with what resulted. I understand that the city has taken the position, or at least the staff has taken the position, that we shouldn't grant a waiver for a financial hardship. There's a couple different points I'd like to make on that I would like for y'all to take into serious consideration, because I think that certainly I understand some of staff's reasoning, but I don't think it takes into account all of the different factors that are at play here. The first is that if you look at the actual statute, which is 350.25a, it basically says utilities shall be placed underground for all new developments with total floor square area over 20,000 square feet. And as it relates to life storage, when we came into the facility and when we got the representations from the city that there were no outstanding zoning ordinances or any issues at that time, it was not a new building. And so at the outset, whether 350.25 even would apply to life storage is questionable. On the second issue, I mentioned this Block and Clark report that we had worked with, and they issued a report. And along with Block and Clark, some of the employees from Life Storage had communications with the city. And on August 6th of 2018, there was an email exchange between Candace Allen and Emmy, and I apologize if I get this name wrong, but it's Emmy Niethammer from the city, in which Emmy Niethammer